Eastern Airlines Flight 401 marked an air tragedy shrouded in mystery and paranormal activity. After the accident that claimed many lives, reports of apparitions emerged, especially of the crew members. On the night of December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401, an imposing Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, took off from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York bound for Miami, Florida. On board were 163 passengers and 13 crew members, unaware that that quiet night would become one of the most chilling and enigmatic aviation tragedies in history. This story, however, does not end with the accident. The supernatural consequences of this event turned Flight 401 into a legend. Approximately at 11:42 p.m., while the crew was preparing for landing, a problem arose. The nose landing gear had not deployed correctly. Captain Robert Loft and his co-pilot Donald Repo, upon noticing the failure, decided to enter a holding pattern to troubleshoot the problem. Everything seemed to be under control. What Captain Loft didn't know was that the plane was descending slowly, dangerously, and without anyone in the cockpit noticing. They were so focused on the landing gear that they forgot to check the altitude. Finally, the plane crashed into the ground in a swampy area in the Everglades, in southern Florida. The tragedy left 101 people dead and the survivors struggling in the mud and stagnant water, surrounded by bodies and wreckage, not fully understanding what had just happened. The horror did not end with the accident. Shortly thereafter, unsettling stories began to circulate among Eastern Airlines employees and passengers of other flights. The rumors spoke of apparitions of two particular figures, Captain Robert Loft and flight engineer Donald Repo, who had lost their lives in the disaster. The strange thing is that the apparitions didn't happen on just any plane, but on those that contained reused parts from the crashed Flight 401. Parts from the crashed plane had been used to repair other planes of the same airline, and as if each piece carried a fragment of the tragedy, paranormal experiences were unleashed. On multiple occasions, passengers and crew members reported seeing Captain Loft and Engineer Repo on different flights. On one occasion, a flight attendant claimed to have seen Engineer Repo sitting in the galley of the plane. When she tried to talk to him, the figure disappeared without a trace. Another case recounts that a pilot saw Loft in the first-class seat. As he approached, the figure vanished before his eyes. The descriptions were always detailed, and those who claimed to have seen these figures insisted they seemed so real that they didn't think they were apparitions until they disappeared. These encounters did not only include apparitions. Some pilots and crew members reported that the spirits seemed to interact with them, as if they were trying to warn them about potential failures or dangers. On one occasion, a flight with parts from the 401 experienced engine problems. The crew claimed that, before the failure became evident, Engineer Repo appeared and warned them about the problem. A particularly terrifying case happened to a flight attendant who, upon opening one of the kitchen compartments, saw Engineer Repo's face reflected in the oven glass. The flight attendant was terrified, and when she discussed what had happened with other colleagues, she discovered that she was not the only one who had had a similar encounter. The flight engineer seemed to make appearances to warn the crew about possible failures in the planes. The situation reached a point where the management of Eastern Airlines began to take action. The sightings of these two ghosts became so frequent that the airline decided it was best to get rid of the parts from Flight 401 that had been reused. The airline authorities tried to hide the phenomenon, warning employees that any mention of the subject could lead to sanctions. However, the stories continued to circulate, fueled by increasingly detailed and hard-to-ignore testimonies. For the airline, this series of events became a public relations nightmare. On one hand, they wanted to preserve the image of safety and professionalism. On the other, they could not deny that dozens of employees and passengers claimed to have seen something inexplicable. Under pressure, they finally decided to remove all the pieces that could be related to Flight 401 and its mysterious appearances. Nowadays, the story of Flight 401 remains alive as one of the most shocking legends in aviation. Although some believe that these